Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where by now you know we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And I gotta say, Chris, right now in my life, I think you're probably the person who matters the most to me.
Aw, that's
I
so
know,
nice.
right? Aw. We have conversations all the time, but we haven't had a podcast of an official formal podcast
Right,
episode
right.
for quite a while, I think.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
it's been a little
everybody,
while.
this is Chris Angel. How do I even describe you, Chris?
I know, right?
Um, we are souls on a journey together, I
Yeah, two
think.
peas in a pod.
Kind
I don't
of,
know.
kind
Peas and
of.
carrots. I don't know.
Yeah, like Jenny and Forrest.
Yeah.
Chris lives in Las Vegas right now, and you want to just explain the journey you're on, Chris, and where you've
Maybe, yeah, I
been
mean, sure.
from?
Well, I mean, it's a couple thoughts if I had to frame that up. One is, I have so appreciated just who you are in my life. I keep telling you that you're my Oprah. Like, if I thought about the connections I've made in my adult life, at least the last 6, 7 years, a lot of them are from Jody. So I appreciate you so much for being such a connector for me.
Yeah, yeah, my
Because
pleasure.
I feel like the further down this road you and I go about distinguishing our world and getting really clear about the kind of conversations we want to have, it can be hard to find some of those people for those conversations. And then I guess the flip side of that is I think there's a lot of people hungry for that conversation. They just don't know that it exists. And so it's been really fun to walk this home with you as we're exploring consciousness, enlightened leadership, making an impact in the world. So,
So
yeah.
I mean, it'd be an interesting conversation at some point to say how we got here. We've been unpacking that forever, I think, probably lifetimes. Um,
Yeah.
how did we get where we are? What paths did we choose? You and I happen to have parallel paths for a while. We
Yeah.
did the Landmark
Right.
Forum in the same year.
Right. Yeah. Crazy.
I'm quite
Years
a bit
ago.
older. Well, yeah, I'm quite a bit older than you are, so it's not like we are contemporaries, yet it feels like we are now.
Well, maybe thought contemporaries,
Yeah,
energetic contemporaries, maybe. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
like we're walking a similar path.
Yeah, we were in real estate, just happened to be in the same real estate company without really knowing that at the time.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah. Didn't know that.
Reconnected through networking.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
you really helped me reframe my own world in 2020 when
Mm,
everything just kind of went crazy.
yeah.
Um,
Right.
so it's really hard to say who is Chris Angel to me, and I'm guessing it's hard for you to say that about yourself, Chris. Like, who am I and why am I here? Because that's kind of what we're up to.
I guess. Yeah. I feel like it gets clear as we go. Like it
Mhm.
helps without, well, you and I play with this stuff, but without a prompt, it's really hard to put it into words because there's so much of that for any of us that makes us who we are in life. You know, you can't have a one liner about who you are because there's so much that goes into making up who you are. But you and I have played with what I call a premise prompt, which is like when blank happens, the world will change. And I think as I've given myself, it's kind of like Mad Libs, like fill in the blank with a noun or an adjective or something like, how would you fill in the blank? And it's helpful for me because it gives me a container to hold maybe who I think I am, or at least what I'm up to, without it having to be all of who I am. And I like that. I like being able to have some of it without having to have all of it.
I think we as a society, at least a Western society, have gotten really used to defining who we are by what we do.
Yeah, yeah,
And
right.
I am a teacher, I am a parent, I am a banker. I mean, whatever it might
Mm,
be. And I did that for a long time. I mean, I defined
yeah.
myself through what I did. And then it occurred to me at some point that who I'm being in the middle of all of my doing is
Mm,
pretty consistent when I look
yeah.
back. And I think you probably would say the
Yeah.
same thing about you. It's been
That's
pretty
good.
consistent who you've been being when you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
you told me you wanted to be a professional friend at one point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that. I feel like I do that. Yeah. In different ways.
And I'm really, you and I are both really interested in other people's work and what they've done and
Hmm.
how we're not the only ones doing this work. And we've both been fascinated by Simon Sinek's new work, which is How to Be a Friend. He's writing a book on how to be a friend. And
Yeah.
I can't wait for that to come out so that we can say, hey, we knew that. We knew that already, you and I.
Right. Well, you and I have been early adopters in things like this for a long time. I feel like, and sometimes in life, feeling like we're behind or feeling like we're missing something. And I think, I don't know when you and I started to discover this, but well, it's probably around when we started talking about the bell curve, but just realizing like, I think I tend to get places 10 years ahead of when other people get there. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying it just historically, if I look back in my life, I just tend to be about 10 years ahead of when people all jump on the bandwagon for something trendy. Um, and I think you're the same way. I feel like you were rereading some of that stuff with Richard Rohr and then the Synchronicities book that you had just finished. And you had read that, what, 20 years ago? More than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
it feels so, at the time, I can't even imagine being the author of those books 20 years ago,
right.
who found his community, apparently, his small community. But now I'm thinking, if I had known then, if I had known you then, like
Uh,
if the work we are currently doing, we were doing then, I mean, how much further along could we be? And yet, at the same time,
right.
everything's exactly perfect. The timing is
Yeah,
perfect.
that's a good one too, because I feel like, I always love the idea, like, what if we could have been on this path sooner? And then I also think, like, I wouldn't have been ready 20 years ago. There was a saying in the Landmark Forum that was like, you don't know your ass from a hole in the ground. Like, I mean, who was I at 20 something to know any different, other than whatever zeal and zest for life I had and the difference. I knew I wanted to make a difference. I knew I wanted to be a professional friend. And I think there are these themes that follow us. Like there is you and I are going through Tim Kelly's work with BB right now in our community around true purpose. And um, part of that work is defining your essence. What is your essence? And I really like that because it's not rooted in a body of work. It's just who you are, and you can't help it. It's not even like you're trying to be it. It's who you are, your essence. And I think for years and years and years, like who I think I've been has been someone who has zest and zeal for life and a professional friend, somebody interested in others. I think that's the same for you. I feel like you and I are very similar in that way.
And I think now that we've kind of discovered this, whether it's through divine intervention or through its, happenstance or random stumbling, coddywampling,
Uh,
it feels to me like when I'm with you and when we are in person is great. I love being in person with you, yet that's not a reason not to continue to collaborate. So
huh?
we are working on some really, I think, really important work. And
Hmm.
I don't know if you've talked to people in your circle about our upcoming book, which we're calling Culture First right now. But I have mentioned it to a couple people, and they've said, "Oh, this is exactly what we need right
Mm,
now. Culture first, not profit first, not
right.
numbers first,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that work, I feel like sometimes I'm impatient about it because I want us to have it done. But the process of uncovering it and unpacking it, at least for me, and knowing I have you to dialogue about with it, is just that process is so rich for me, even if we
Yeah.
don't get to the end result, which we will, but even if we wouldn't.
There's the thing about like uh my own creative process of being sitting with the distinctions of the work. Like, you and I have mapped out the I would say the heart of it. I know for me there's still some details I have to go back in and sort of like fill in about it before I think the project can move forward. So some of that's on me. It's just stuck there. But it is like I'm not using hustle and grind to get it done. I'm sitting with well, on one hand, I'm sitting with my resistance. I'm sitting with my overwhelm because I'm like, oh, this is like a big. It takes something for me to generate. It takes something for me to look into the void of culture and be like, what is missing here? I think sometimes we miss that. In the world of ChatGPT, we just here, ChatGPT, you write this for me. But that's not the spiritual practice I want from this. I want to look into the void of culture and be like, this is what I want to say about it.
Yeah.
And that just requires a little bit of incubation and sitting with it. And I feel like you said something the other day to me too about just kind of getting clear on the why of this project. And I'm so interested to explore that with you as you get clear about what you feel like the why is.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to just kind of spitball that even right here. Here, what I love about our conversations, and for podcast listeners, this is what I you and I, Chris, are calling emergent conversations. It's nice to have prompts. It's nice to have fill in the blanks. And yet, if we're truly present with each other and with the dialogue, things come through us. And
Uh-huh.
in that emergence that happens, that's why I like having it recorded, because I go back later and go, ooh, there was
Mm.
something there. You know,
Hmm.
we've talked about it being the mastermind concept, where the best parts of each of us is invited into the conversation, which couldn't
Right.
have been there without that. And that's what I really love about the space we hold for each other. So
Mm.
digging into it and digging into the why of it, you said I want to look into the void of culture, which
Yeah.
would be what's missing. In a
Hmm.
void, something's missing, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
when you think about that, even what, so what? Big whoop, big deal. What's the deal with culture then, if you think about it like that? What is culture?
Yeah. Well, I guess what comes up for me is the madness of things. Like I just
Mm.
think how many people, let's just say America, not even the rest of the world, but how many people go to work for money? Like it's the thing. I got a job because I needed money. Or I got a job because I wanted insurance, like benefits. And those two things are golden handcuffs. Like, I think it's very common for people to outgrow the culture of the company they're in. Their soul expands, their dreams expand, and yet their job and their tasks don't expand. And so then there's some dissonance between who they've become and the job they're asked to do. And yet they can't leave to pursue their purpose and their contribution in the world because they need the money and the benefits. And if we had a culture, if we treated culture like it actually mattered, and it wasn't just a poster on the wall or something we hired a keynote speaker to come in and rah our people for, and then back to what's normal, if we actually put culture first, you would have emergent companies, you'd have emergent missions, you'd have things that continue to expand and evolve as your people continue to expand and evolve. And nobody would need to leave, and everybody would feel inspired because you gave them the space and the conditions to be inspired. And that is a function of culture. That is absolutely 100% about culture.
You know, when you're saying that, I'm thinking about, because I tend to go really, really big in visioning when I'm given the space to do that, and then my old being pulls it back and
Hmm.
says, "Well, that could never happen." And when you were talking just then, I had this vision. I had a vision of a baseball league, a baseball league with, 20 teams. And
Yeah.
this baseball league of 20 teams, everybody in the baseball league knows we're playing baseball, yet they're grooming and training and helping their baseball players be the best they can be. And at one team, they have four really good shortstops, and they don't need four really good shortstops. They only need two really good shortstops.
Hmm.
And what happens if the people who are emerging in the culture of that team are like, I thought I was an outfielder and I'm really not? Now, what do we do with that really amazing person whose
Hmm.
amazingness doesn't have a place on our team? Well, we would have a league, right? And the league would say, I have this amazing shortstop that I don't have a place for. What do
Hmm.
you need? And in that world of baseball, but
Yep. Yep.
insert company here or
Yep.
industry or whatever, wouldn't it be cool if we had as a foundation of everything we're building, a fundamental, the culture first mentality? So
Hmm.
these companies are members or whatever. I'm just using this language because I don't have anything better yet, but are members of the culture first community, and they've gone through our institute or they've gone to our resort in Mazatlan, and they've done their work, and now we've gotten to know each other on a soul level, and on
Yeah.
that soul level we can exchange our people
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're able to learn and grow
Uh,
individually inside the
wow.
whatever the company's doing. It's not even all that big a deal what it's doing, because it would be making stuff and doing stuff for an exchange, but the doing of it wouldn't be as important as who they're becoming while they're doing it.
Yeah. I love that. We kind of talked about that several
Yeah.
years ago, actually. We were talking about having sort of a recruiting platform
Mhm, mhm.
that could source talent for different people inside our ecosystem. But when everybody in the ecosystem, the membership, whatever the club, the baseball league, when everybody in there is coming from contribution and cooperation, not competition, or coming from abundance and not scarcity, then it's not like then if somebody out. First of all, if you have a culture first approach, people don't necessarily want to leave. right? So it's like it's a good retention tool. But if they outgrew it, or you're like, there's another opportunity, and you were so happy for them to go pursue that opportunity in another team, another company, and you were happy to let them go because you knew that the baseball league would find other people for you, and they would be, and who they found for you would be a good fit, because the ethos here is a culture first ethos, that what we're about here is who we're being as human beings, not our KPIs and our performance this quarter.
And in the league, we'd have somebody who's doing like a bakery, and then somebody over here who's making a foundry, making metal. It doesn't even matter. If we had one company, that's great because one company could do that. But if we're going to build an economy and a world that helps each other,
Yeah.
think about our world when we were in real estate and we had
Yeah.
mortgage people and we had, title companies. And if we built this in the way that all these people trust, we have a foundation of trust the way it is. I
Yeah.
want to do business with you and I want to exchange with you. And then the money is secondary, but the money's there because we're in an abundance mentality,
Yeah.
not a scarcity one.
I think companies get siloed also. Like,
Mm.
um, if you have a baseball league and we're again, everybody, I'm sure you're staying up with that's a metaphor here, but if you have a baseball league and you're not just used to scrimmaging yourself,
Yeah,
right? But you
right.
actually get to play with other teams who are
Mhm.
conscious and who are up to the same type of contribution on the planet, then you're cross training. You're getting you're not siloed. And I think sometimes companies get stuck in the law of the lid, right? To
Mhm,
pull our
mhm.
friend Maxwell into this, like they get stuck in either the C-suite is the lid because they're they want things the way they want things, and they're afraid to give people too much power or too much freedom, because God forbid they get off task of KPIs and what we're supposed to be driving home. And there's so much control issues in a lot of companies that there's no room to breathe. There's no oxygen in the culture, But if you're around other people in other companies, you as a C-suite talking to other people in a C-suite from other companies that are honest about management, talking to other management, sales, operations, like and then cross. I mean, there's a fluidity then in a what's the word I really want? Fluentness to the conversation that happens, the language that happens in conscious conversations. Yeah.
Think about I used to play racquetball, and when I played racquetball just starting out, I was terrible. And then I got better as I
Mm.
practiced, and then I thought, "Oh, I'm really good. I'm going to go to this other league." And I got trounced
Yeah.
because I wasn't good enough for that league.
Mm.
And I went back to the other league and I got better and I practiced. And I only got better when I played against people who were better than I was. And
Yeah.
if we can not have the fear of I'm going to get beat, instead I
Mm.
can say I'm going to learn, I'm going to
Mhm.
grow from people. We're teaching so many life skills in this process that can be transferred to communities and families. And there's just so much opportunity to help people be what they are created to be. And
Yeah.
and we spend, what is it, one third, one third, one third of our time sleeping, home, and work. And so what if we transferred two of those so
Right.
that whatever that is in math. I was told there'd be no math. 8 and 8 is 16. 16 hours. 16 hours of our day we're actually awake and conscious
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
doing what we're doing from a space of consciousness and not trying desperately to not screw up.
I like Steve, your friend Steve Farber's, love is just good business or whatever,
Hmm.
however he says that. Like,
Hmm.
I did.
You got to put the word damn in there, Chris. Love
How
is
does he say
just
it?
damn good business.
Damn good business. Yeah. And I think so. And so is consciousness. Like there's one of the reasons I um, appreciate structures like B corporations, right? Is there's a measurement for something more than profits, right?
Mhm.
People, planet, profits. If you want to do like a triple bottom line, that we're measuring not just we're measuring other things. And the idea that you could measure your own expansion, your own growth consciously, um, is interesting to me, because I think it's true. What gets measured gets done. I do think there's some truth to that. Um, so why not measure that? But you would need a baseball league that wants to measure that, because if you're a conscious baseball team playing in a finite league that only measures score and, home runs and doesn't score other things, then the gravitational pull of the way the industry is will suck the oxygen out of your possibility. But if you put yourself around others who are measuring the same things, now you actually breathe life. Rather than sucking the oxygen out, you're breathing life into the game you're playing.
Funny, I didn't even really think about baseball being the metaphor. So sports, but sports is such a good, I
Yeah.
look at culture, right? I look at the
Yeah.
culture of sports teams.
All right.
And I'm really into basketball, more than any other sport.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch what Iowa women's basketball team has been doing over the many years. This year they didn't win. They didn't get to the Final Four. That's always your goal. Yet the people who are part of that program, it seems, on the outside at least, that they don't want to leave it. They want to
Yeah.
be part of that. And winning is secondary to who they become and who they get to know, how they get to know each other, and how they build lifelong friendships. And there's so many more things than sports for these young women,
Yeah.
because very few of them are probably going to go on to play professionally, although two did the last year's
Nice.
group. And so there's a lot more to it. And oh, by the way, we could make a bunch of money. And oh, by the way, we could get promoted. And oh,
Yeah.
by the way, there's just so much that, like, to your point about measuring, they
Yeah.
measure things like how many times you interrupted the ball or how many, and all the things that don't make the score sheets,
Uh-huh.
because they're
Huh.
they're trying to create those opportunities for
Hmm.
the people who aren't the stars to feel like a star because they
Oh,
all make
nice.
a difference.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I feel like I think it was maybe a landmark principle, but we live into the conversations we surround ourselves with.
Yes.
Like if you are surround if this is if I bring it back to culture for a minute, if what you're surround the conversation you're surrounded by is KPIs and performance,
Mm.
um, then the life you're living, you're gonna live into that conversation. And if you're surrounded by, which is PLU was a great football team with Frosty Westering back in the day, one of the all-time winningest football coaches in history. And people skipped Division I positions to come play for his program for the same reason you're talking about Iowa, like that there was something else happening here. And the conversations they were living into, John Wooden's a great example of this. The conversation that people came to be in John Wooden's program, not because he was originally winning, because he wasn't originally winning, but because of who he was being in the conversations they were having. And so there really are two worlds here. You can have a profit first culture, and I'm not saying that's wrong.
Yeah.
You're going to live into whatever that world creates. If you have and then another world, you can have a culture first conversation where you're living into these things that really inspire the human spirit and create retention and grow your company because you're no longer the lid on where your company goes because you've given people some freedom and some skills to do so.
Set it up I'm going to call it a pull rather than a push.
Mm-hmm.
Fear-based would say you have to do it this way. You're being watched, and we're going to watch for when you screw up. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know that that's as prevalent anymore as it used to be, although I could be wrong. It could still be
Yeah.
very prevalent.
Yeah.
But in the space of I'm going to watch how you succeed, and I'm going to promote your behavior when you do things well.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to look for the ways people are doing things well. We've just been programmed to look at the ways they are doing things not so well.
Yeah. Or the way they're doing things we don't want them to do. I
Yeah.
want you to do it this way.
Yeah, we've decided what you
Uh,
should do. Yeah.
yeah. Right. Right. Here's that. Yeah. I kind of feel like it is actually in our framework for culture first too, which is the embodied conviction. Like when people are embodied in who they are, like that they're not trying to be something they're not. They're playing to their strengths, right? Minimizing their weaknesses. Uh, Marcus Buckingham's work was all about that. Then you get full engagement. You get people who show up engaged. They're embodied. They're engaged. And the conviction piece is then they bring that embodiment they bring some conviction from that to the work they do. And I just think like you need people who want to be there. You need people who are bringing their best, And I just think I just kind of feel like that's not normal to have a culture that invites that?
Not it's not expected, I don't suppose. I was in a book club many, many years ago at a company, a manufacturing company, and they had just hired somebody new in the role of some sort of HR, and she had come from a previous company. And as I was getting to know this company where we were doing the book study was If Aristotle Ran General Motors, which was a really fascinating
Hmm.
study. And I asked her about her switch from the company she'd come from to the one she was now in. And I said, man, it just must be so great for you to be at this new company because they seem so engaged. And she said, it is the hardest thing I've had to do. And I said,
Hmm.
why? She
Hmm.
goes, at my last place, and she didn't probably use this language, but it was fear-based. I knew what I had to do. If I messed up, I got in trouble. So I knew what I had to do. And every day I just knew that was what I needed to do. Over here, they want to encourage me to be creative, to bring myself, to do all the things that are me. And I'm so scared that the other shoe's going to drop someday. It
Hmm.
can't be this good. And so she was bringing
Huh.
her old programming with her to a whole new environment,
Hmm.
which took a while for her to
Yeah.
accept that it could possibly, that somebody could care about her as a human.
Yeah. Right. I feel like we talk about that in the Enlightened Leadership Lab, like our
Yeah.
community of
Hmm.
leaders. Or at least I would say, not only do we talk about that, but I feel like that's a space where we get to practice really stepping into our own thoughts. I think
Hmm.
it's not common for us. I think it is common for us to go to work and do what we think is expected of us. I don't think it's common for us to go to work and think for ourselves and think, this is what I want to bring to this project. We kind of just go, what's expected and how do I comply with what's expected? And I think if we're really going to step into, a new world, if, a new earth, Eckhart Tolle, or creating heaven on earth, or some higher vibration of a planet, whatever, something that works. Um, we need people to increase their leadership quotient. We need people to increase who they are as a thinker, as a feeler, a doer, a beer.
Challenge. I'm glad you brought it up that way. Because the challenge is when things happen from the bottom up, when the people, and I hate to say that that's a hierarchical term, but the people who are doing the work, the people who are in the company doing their best to comply, when they evolve before the people above them, there's a
Mm,
huge dilemma then because then the thumb comes down and I have to
mm,
make sure you don't get smarter than I or you don't learn
yeah,
something around me. I mean, that was my experience most of my career. And I
right.
just didn't know. I mean, I remember my
Yeah.
last boss saying, "You have to let me know where you are every 15 minutes. I want to every 15 minutes." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? It's going to take me half the day to figure all that out." And yeah,
Right,
and it was
right.
just because he didn't trust me. He didn't trust that I wouldn't be doing something that would take me out of his
Right.
thumb. And he was right
Mm,
because
mm,
I was. I couldn't stay stuck. And that's why I started my own business. I left him to start my
right.
own business.
Huh.
Not that I
I,
knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I didn't want, and that's why I started my business.
I like, based on that, I think having a baseball league where, without a place to go, I'm going to just use a metaphor, without a baseball league that's like that,
Yeah.
what's your option? You have the only option is to go to another baseball team and hope that someone has a heartbeat and a conscience and some sort of a favor towards culture. But if, and this is why I'm so excited about this work with you and Culture First work is, and the consulting company that we're creating around Culture First, is that when you start to have, I'll say respites, but when you start to have spaces that actually operate and play the game that way, you increase the amount of options that people have to step out of their prison, right? Their KPI prison, and step into something that breathes life into their soul. And so, but there needs to be a baseball league. If you don't have a league that says this is what the league stands for, it's hard to attract teams to the league, right? You just end up with onesie twosies.
Yeah. And if we don't go as broad as a league, let's just say a team, then let's go back a little bit. Because if you're someone who's listening to this who's saying, I don't have a league, there's no way for me to do anything, you can do that inside your own organization if you have courage, if you have a
Yeah,
space
that's good.
like we have on Monday where
Huh?
you can practice some of this stuff and then go back, because what you can learn is to have conversations that don't push people away, but that draw them in. And maybe you're somebody who's starting to understand this and you're
Yep.
not the leader. I
Yep.
know there are ways you can have conversations with the person who is in that titled role, and just ask some questions. It might take some coaching, it might take some time, but if you're somebody who's waking up,
Mhm.
it's all is not lost if you don't have a league,
If you're the
right?
popcorn popping, if
Right.
you're the,
See? See? All these metaphors we've used over the
I
years.
knew you like me using that one. Yes.
Uh,
Uh, I think there, I hear three very practical, maybe this is a great way to sort of wind it down, but,
mhm.
one, if you're not in a company that is interested in this, but you're interested in this, like you're saying, like you're waking up to stuff. So joining something like the Enlightened Leadership Lab is a place where you get to practice on a weekly basis emergent conversations where you're not told how to think, but we're exploring something together. That's to me the root of leadership, the beginning of leadership. Um, a second option would be if your company is sort of open to this, but they like things like Simon Sinek. They've had their teams read Simon Sinek books or Mel Robbins books or whoever. Then, but you still see a gap or a lag between what was everybody was inspired about in the book and then what the day-to-day culture feels like. You could bring Jody and I in for, this work. Like not only bring us in for like some initial installation of a culture first framework, but then work with your company over the course of a year or two, because it takes time to practice this type of culture, this kind of space. The third thing that I think, Jody, is maybe more to the baseball league, and that's not on any of you listening, but I feel like that's a vision that you and I can kind of play with and create. It's like, Jody and I are out here creating the connections and the resources to have an ecosystem, a culture first ecosystem in league where companies are resourced um, with each other, by each other, for each other, in a culture first kind of way. And that's not up to any of you listening. That's just what Jody and I are working on, big picture.
You said at the very beginning, you mentioned that a lot of the people you've met have been connections I've made, because
Mhm.
I know I'm good at that. I know I'm a good
Yeah.
connector. And
Yeah.
so we have that built in right now, you and I. We are good at finding people and connecting them. And so that is a resource you can expect from us. I would venture to
Yeah.
say you can count on me for that
Mhm.
if you're listening and you want that.
Yeah.
We also are going to be doing more speaking. So keynote speaking, conference speaking, things like that about this topic. So HR conventions, ASTD, oopsie, it's not called that anymore. It used to be called the American Society for Training and Development,
Uh-huh.
ASTD, but that's really
Uh-huh.
bad.
Yeah.
So they changed their
Didn't age
name
well.
to
Yeah.
ATD. But organizations like that, SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, those are great connections for us to be able to share some of our work, because we've done a lot of work. We have research, we have resources, as you were mentioning, that
Yeah.
we can share. And because you and I can't, I'll not speak for you right this minute, but I will not let this die. I
Mhm.
cannot let this die. This is
Yeah.
a pull for me to my
Yeah.
future that is calling to me, and I can't let this go. I've felt restless and discontented in the last couple of weeks just because I
Mm.
feel like there's more, and I don't
Mhm.
even know for me where that more is. But it's a baseball league. It's this conversation.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
these
Right.
kinds of things that,
Right.
will pull both of us, I think, through and into what we're
Yeah.
here to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you mentioned Enlightened Leadership Lab. Do you want to give them a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, the place to go check that out would be enlightenedleadershiplab.com/invite. There's a video of Jody and I there explaining the community that we have. There's an application, so it's not like you just sign up, but fill out the application. We'll follow up with next steps. That's probably the best next step for you guys if you want to reach out to us and learn more about what we're up to.
Is there anything else you'd like to promote, Chris? Is there anything else you're working on? Anybody else you'd like to get a connection to or with?
No, I want to just keep the focus on the stuff that you and I are working on here.
Okay.
So I don't want to dilute
So
that at
can
all.
if people wanted to find you, how would they find you?
I mean,
What's the best
just
way?
search Chris Angell on Facebook. As I'm most active on Facebook. Angell is Angell, two L's. Angell. My dad used to say it's because we're from the other place. It took me a while to get that, and then I realized he meant hell has two,
Hell,
two
two
L's, right?
L's. That's good.
Yeah. It's Chris
That's
Angel
good.
with two L's because we're from the other place.
That's awesome. And he
So,
lives in Vegas, but he's not the mind freak. Although
huh,
we could
true.
we could say
I mean,
maybe you have a little bit of mind freak in you.
a little freaky. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm in Vegas right now.
Awesome. Well,
Cool.
thank you, Chris. I love our conversations. And
Me
as
too.
always, this is what it means to me to get real.
Mm.
And by the way, just a side note, this podcast was born out of our conversations early in the 2020s.
20
And
in the
so
2020s. Yeah. Love it.
thank you for that.
And you're
So
still
thanks,
going. I
everybody.
love it.
As always, yeah, still going. Get real, everybody. Do something this week to get real in your own life. And we will talk again. Thanks.